Good evening. I'm Chris Reardon, Dean of the Daniels College of Business. Welcome to the first Voices of Experience speaker series for the academic year 2012-2013. As you know, Voices of Experience was created to highlight two of our attributes at Daniels: ethical leadership and community. Our CEOs and executives that come in share their stories about their corporations and, as importantly, about how they lead with ethics and integrity, something that's surely needed in today's business environment. It's also about bringing together our community. As you know, Voices of Experience is free and open to the public because of our kind sponsors. I'd like to recognize those now. Our in-kind sponsors are Net Impact, the Marketing Roundtable, the National Association of Corporate Directors, and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. Our financial sponsors are Grant Thornton, CoBank, First Bank, Chase, and our newest sponsor at a platinum level is U.S. Bank. Let's give them a warm thank you. We have had some amazing events at the University of Denver over the last month, and probably the biggest event, as you know, will be hosted on our campus on October 3rd, the first presidential debate. With Colorado being a swing state, certainly it is an important place to have this debate and also an important forum to have these conversations. But tonight, we have a very special guest, Mike Long, the CEO, President, and Chairman of Arrow Electronics. Mike joined Arrow in 1991 and became CEO in 2009. The company just recently moved their headquarters after 4 attempts from Mike, I told him 4 times is the charm, recently here to Colorado, and we're delighted to have a Fortune 150 company in our presence. They are among the world's most admired companies by Fortune, and they certainly are thinking about what lies ahead as they are providers of electronic technology and enterprise solutions for corporations. As you know, I like to try to come up with fun facts about our guest speakers, and if you get on and Google Mike Long, you will find nothing. I asked him, I said, you know, being in the technology business, you must have the techniques to actually scrub the history, or else you're leading a really boring and clean life. He chose to tell me that he was leading a very boring and clean life, but that I did need to talk to some of his colleagues, perhaps after hours. I couldn't be more thrilled to have Mike as our first speaker, so let's give him a warm welcome, Mike Long, CEO of Arrow Electronics.
Thank you very much. Technology, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. My name is Mike Long, and I want to tell you what a true honor it is to be here tonight, to be able to tell you a little bit about what I've been through in my career, what Arrow is like. But before I get into any of that, I want to thank the Colorado Symphony. It was nice for them to come out and play while everybody was getting seated, and we're a big supporter of the Symphony, and it was very nice that they would come out and support us on a night like that and make it easier for everybody to sit down and get comfortable. With the upcoming presidential debate, boy, the oldest and largest private university in Colorado, you guys take full stage. This is a national and even an international debate, and what's really interesting this time is things are so close, you are going to get to see some great questions and answers and make your choices for the future, and it's all going to be done here in Colorado. So really a big hats off to the staff and the faculty and the students of DU to be a part of that. So congratulations. You know, at Arrow, our business is the future. We think 5 years out. And so when we do things, we also think about what happens in the future. So really our money or our donations and our help come to DU in a very different way. They come in the form of internships and working with the universities to help get students jobs in the future in the electronics industry. And we prefer that that's where we spend our money because the students are the future of the company And the faculty today, the things you're teaching them, will help them be a big success in electronics in years to come. So I understand tonight's called Voices of Experience. That's really pretty interesting for me because it doesn't set the bar too high, because I'm old enough to have just enough experience to be dangerous right now. But it also doesn't say that the experiences you're going to hear about are good or are they bad experiences. And I think the fact that I've been around for a long time and the fact that I'm the CEO of Aero Electronics probably qualified me to be here. Maybe nothing else, nothing more. But it also means that I really recognize for the students that your faculty is bringing in many, many, many opinions of how to run companies, many opinions of how to treat your coworkers, many opinions about the future and what it may bring for that company. So you are some of the luckiest students in the entire world that everybody diligently fights to get you the best speakers. And I say that because I do know personally some of the speakers you've had in the past, and I know what it took to get me here, and I'll tell you why. You guys think going through college in 4 years is really a scary proposition? Try being here and looking around at this. You know, you don't have to do this from the corner office. So, but my personal and my business career has really been formed by a series of reinventions. So if there's any common thread you hear tonight, it's going to be about reinvention and the reinvention process. So I'm really not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. And I'm really not going to tell you how to run a business. What I hope to do is just share some reinvention stories with you and hope that maybe you'll take a little bit of that home with you. So having said that, the first question you guys should be asking is, well, who is this guy? And, you know, it's a little hot in here, so if I sneak now, I might be able to get out. But, you know, if your chair's comfortable, you can sit back and ask again, who is this guy? Well, I'm the CEO of what is the largest company in Colorado, Aero Electronics. And really, since my job is what got me here, the next question that you might want to ask is, what is an aero? And I know I was invited to speak to you this evening, but you should know who's speaking to you and why they're speaking. So really the question that exists is, what is aero? And in North America, I get more people coming up to me and saying, God, thank you, that shirt is so awesome. Well, just a minute, it gets worse. On Long Island, where we were headquartered, people still think, and I might add, we're the largest employer on Long Island, but people on Long Island still think we're the local exterminator. Well, if that doesn't quite get you, the Asian students will get this one. In Asia, they think we make toilets. So being a business-to-business company isn't always easy. But the truth is, we're in the Fortune 130s. We're a $21 billion company. The thing that I'm the most proud of any stat you'll see tonight, is the ability that Aero could have been one of the top 100 places to work for. Now, that doesn't say we're number one, and it didn't say we're number 100, but the truth is, this is something we strive for every day. And it's not easy in a business that has 17,000 people. But again, it is something. By the numbers, this is probably the most boring part of the presentation. I'll totally understand, but I think it's important to give you an idea of the complexity of our company. In the electronics world, we have 185 million different part numbers that are in our database. This equates to a constant run of $2 billion of inventory. So for those of you students that have gone through inventory management, try to consider juggling $2 billion of capital tied up on an everyday basis, day in, day out, 365 days a year. We deliver 74 million devices a day, but think about it, 850 per second, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And we have 17,000 people in 53 different countries. What's really interesting, that will also give you an idea of complexity, is that today in the world, there are more cell phones that exist than there are toothbrushes. So think about it. Colgate-Palmolive wants our customer list. What I'd really like to do before we get too far into this is to show you a short video that will maybe encapsulate some of the things that I've talked about.
There is a group of people.
Very special people. People who are thinking about the future.
How it will work.
Engineers.
Designers.
Planners.
Geniuses.
They're thinking about what's next.
After what's next.
After what's next.
Cars.
Appliances. Houses.
Planes.
Data centers.
Tablets.
Laptops.
Handhelds.
Smartphones.
It's a lot to think about.
It's not science fiction or fantasy.
It's real. Tangible.
Not just what's possible.
But what's practical?
These people are thinking not just about tomorrow or the next day.
They're in a completely different place.
It's a different mindset. They're thinking
5 years out.
5 years out, there will be
New chips.
new batteries,
New light sources. New materials.
new ways of making things.
new places to make things.
5 years out,
The things we use.
today will seem primitive,
Quaint.
old-fashioned.
Because 5 years out,
We'll be working with all kinds of new technologies.
the game will change.
New power sources,
New supply chains. New input devices.
New alloys.
new composites.
And of course, new electronics.
The power to do just about anything.
Are you one of these people? Are you thinking 5 years out?
Then you're probably working
With us.
Aero Electronics. Are you 5 years out?
So as I share this information with you about Aero, I'd like you to keep in mind 3 words, which are really the core tenet of what we do. Guide innovation forward. Think about it like Nike. So Nike doesn't win any football games or tennis matches or golf, but what do? They equip the athletes that do. So in many ways, that's what Aero does in the field of electronics. We complete the innovator. We make the things happen that they think of. And that is what we do. Now, I'm not really convinced that I look like somebody who should be running a $21 billion company. So I thought I might take some time to share my past with you and just how Aero and I collided. It wasn't really elegant. So I grew up on a farm as a kid, and we really didn't have much money, but you can tell by my figure we had plenty to eat. And at an early age, my father said to me, there are 2 things in life that you're going to do. Number 1 was you're going to work. Well, I kind of looked around, and on a farm there's always things to do. Well, number 2 was you're going to play sports. And I believe that during my entire career, both of those pursuits have served me well. As a teenager, I worked in the construction business. Believe it or not, at age 11, I would dig holes outside of foundations so stairs could go down into the basement. and then I would haul lumber. And by the age of 18, I had learned enough carpentry that I had actually started my own construction business. I know most CEOs say that sports was the #1 thing for them. For me, it was actually that business. Because what did I learn? I learned that you could actually start a business with little or no money in my case. So what I did, I would go out, I would do odds and ends for people. And that's how I got started. Eventually, I was doing decks. But the real transformation came from me is when the first insurance company hired us to fix a house that had been burned. And I learned something very instrumental on that first job. And that was, if I can find something of complexity that people don't want to do, and if I can get that completely out of their life, there's a profit to be made in that. And you will see that same type of thought process go over and over and over. So I thought I was pretty cool while I was going to college because I had some money and I had some employees. Well, the time came and I graduated. And my dad came to me and he said, "Now get a job." Are you kidding me? Dad, I've got some employees, I've got this construction business. And he said, "Yeah, that's all fine, but you didn't go to college to do that." But his idea was that I needed to do something maybe a little more spectacular. And since I was the first kid that went to college in our family, I guess my dad was the one that anointed that says you need to be white collar versus blue collar. And you have to consider how your upbringing has an impact on what your future is. Because my family didn't really like the idea, because my entire family is blue collar, that I went to school not on the 4-year plan. I was a 5-year student. So it was very important that I got out there. My first job was with Allen Bradley Corporation. And it just so happened that electronics were starting to move. And I became a buyer at Allen Bradley, and I purchased electronics for the production line. So after about 1.5 years, I kept meeting all these sales guys that were coming in, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. The harder they work, the more they do, the more they get paid. You can control your own destiny. So I thought sales was something that I would like to do. So I went to my boss and I said, you know, I'd like to be a salesperson. And he said, wow, you need an engineering degree. Well, I'm a business degree. Doesn't that do anything? Nope. We've been in business a long time. You have to be an engineer. So at the time, it didn't occur to me to go look for a job somewhere else. I thought you took a job and you stayed there forever, and if you raised your hand to do a different job, they said, yeah, go do it. Well, my first learning was it didn't quite work that way. So I ended up spending 2 years at Milwaukee School of Engineering before I figured out, why don't you go interview somewhere else? Slow learner, 5 years, you know, you're going to start to see some connecting points here. So I went out and I applied for a job. The first place I went was Aero Electronics. It didn't turn out that great. So what they told me was I wasn't qualified, and I couldn't go to work for them. Boy, I was pretty dejected at that point because I knew some of the people at Aero, and I was thinking, boy, I should be able to get in there. I think I'd be a good salesman. So they didn't hire me. But their competitor, Schweber Electronics, wanted to open an office in Milwaukee. And the truth was that office had opened and closed 3 or 4 times, so they couldn't get anybody that had experience. And because I didn't know this, I thought the opportunity sounded pretty neat. So I took that job, and I worked harder than I ever worked in my entire life. And you know what? The business took off. It was a fascinating thing. We started putting more and more salespeople in. We started to have more inside resources. And I knew we had gotten there when we brought our first engineer in. And then the boom was lowered on me. My boss came in one day and said, "We're going to hire a general manager." And I said, "Well, that's great. I'd love the job." He goes, "No, you're a kid. You're too young. We're not going to give you that job." So I said to him, in the most best way that I knew, "Well, that's not acceptable to me. I expect to have this job. I got this business to this place." And he said, "Well, you don't understand. I'm the VP and you're a sales guy. So I decide who gets in there." So being dejected, I obviously went home and thought to myself, well, you know, I left Allen Bradley. I could easily leave here and go find my dream or figure out what I need to do to get that job. So the VP left also, and I'm sure he had some second thoughts about it, seeing as I did have the vast majority of the relationships in the area. That turned to be worth something. So one night at midnight, I'm in bed sleeping. Of course, you heard I live a pretty boring life, so I get a call. And it's the VP. And it's obvious that this guy had been out. So he says, "Mike, if you can be in Chicago at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning for a meeting, we'll give you the job." So what do you think I did? I mean, I hopped up, I ran into the shower. I didn't know how long I was going to be there, so I grabbed a suitcase of clothes, threw it in the car, drove as fast as I could to get to Chicago, and I was in our parking lot at 5 o'clock. And I really didn't know whether I could see straight or not. I just knew that I had a shot at this job. And I thought, okay, the VP is in, his boss is in, which I now realize that's why they were out. So 6 o'clock comes, guess what? No one shows up. 7 o'clock, no one shows up. 8 o'clock, no one shows up. 10 o'clock in the morning, they pull up and sort of stumble out of the car. And I get out of my car and walk up to him, and I'm all happy because I made my time commitment. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Last night at midnight, you called me and said if I could be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, you'd give me the job." So the slightly hung over VP looked at his boss and said, "Did I say that?" He goes, "Yeah, don't you remember? You called the kid last night after we talked about it, told him if he could be there." So he goes, "Were you there at 6 o'clock?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, then you got the job. Go home and do your work." So that was my first promotion, and it wasn't as elegant as you might think. So I continued to move up the ladder, and then again, phase 2 hit. What was phase 2? Arrow Electronics. They came in and purchased the company I was working for. And now I figured, okay, these are the guys that told me I didn't have enough experience. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, I can't stay with them. Why? Because they weren't too excited to hear from me the first time I interviewed. I figured this time it's going to be worse and I have a lot more to lose. So I made an appointment with the CEO and I went in and said, I'm going to leave. But before I go, I want to make sure that all the people that work for me are placed in the right area and that they have jobs and that the transition is over. And once you've decided that that transition is over, I will then leave. And the CEO sat back and he looked at me and he said, have you interviewed anywhere? And I said, no, I hadn't interviewed and I wasn't going to. until I knew all of my people were taken care of. And he said, then you wouldn't mind giving me 30 days to come up with something. And I said, no. I said, I'm not leaving because I don't like Arrow. I just didn't think that there would be an opportunity. He goes, no, I have a special opportunity I'm thinking of. I'll call you back. So on the 30th day, I get the phone call. Yeah, there's been nothing easy about this. So on the 30th day, I get the call. And what he says to me is, I want to do something special. So now he's got my attention. He says, I want to open a business to where the guys that open that business put their money right beside Arrow's. And Arrow will loan the company the money to grow the business. And oh, by the way, we don't want much other than at the time, 18% interest. We don't really want much, but if it works, we want the option to buy the company back from you. I didn't hear anything other than I was going to start a company. But what that meant was I mortgaged my home, I mortgaged my cars, I called anybody that I knew to get money, and that I gave it all to them, and that's how Capstone Electronics was started, which was the passive piece of Arrow that is about $4 billion today. So after that business gets going, I do a short stint in Greenville, South Carolina. Arrow, of course, bought the company back. By the way, after the second year of profitability, because on the third year they would have had to pay more, and I didn't really understand those calculations other than I could pay my mortgage off on my house and have a little money left over. And then the CEO says, I've got another opportunity for you. So I went to Greenville, South Carolina to work on a business that we really shouldn't have been in, but we got in. And it was PC and printer distribution. But the writing was way on the wall for this one. I went there and I could figure out in one day what we did. And you have to understand, back then, I never opened a PC. That's not how I got things done. So I didn't really understand computers and PCs and printers and putting them together and making things work. But in one day, I fully understand what they did. They sold PCs and printers, and the value proposition was lowest price. So it really wasn't anything that could happen other than make money because there was no value. So I kind of went back and said, look, what got you here? Finding something that is complex, scaling it, and getting it out of people's lives will give you the ability to make money. So I was there with a partner and we said, wow, this is not the business because we don't have any value add or there's nothing that the customer needs from us other than that initial transaction. So at that time we moved up to the server and the storage arena. Data center products, which Arrow does today, that is about $8 billion. But the interesting thing about this is we lost $6 million the first year in the storage business. And we decided, a lot of people wanted to get out. Believe me, in the corporate world, you lose $6 million doing anything, you are sitting in the CEO's office. And it's usually not a very pretty situation because at that time, he doesn't care what your background is or what you know. It's really a venting process that goes one way. But I casually explained to him that I knew what the problem was. And I was lucky because he was astute enough to say, so you mean we can add value to these products? And I said, yeah, we can. We can actually show customers how to install them. It is a very difficult process, but if we do it right, we will make a lot of money. And it worked. So then after that episode, it was 2008, I became the CEO of Arrow. And during that time, we've done as many as 10 acquisitions a year to continue rounding out our innovation profile. And if you think about it, acquisitions in the general market fail 7 out of 10 times. So I'd really like to share why I believe that that doesn't happen to us. And that is, we keep the entrepreneurs entrepreneurial. And what I mean by that is we let them continue to grow the dream. There was something about that company that they were doing innovative that we liked. And it is very easy for a big company to come in and kick the soldiers and say, do it this way. But usually, they need 1 or 2 things of help to go the distance. So we really position Arrow to help them with their balance sheet, if they're strapped for cash, if they need to be scaled with back-end processing, such as delivery or payment, we can get them on different computer systems. But if they need something, what the entrepreneur knows is we have their back. They are not the enemy. They are our friend. They were our friend when we were courting them. They were our friend because they had something that we thought was good. And they're our friend afterwards. So in most of our acquisitions, the entrepreneurs actually stay with us. And sometime when we've got about 10 hours, I can tell you how fun that is to have about 30 or 40 of these guys still around in your business. So that's really a bit about my background. Now I thought I'll tell you a little bit about Arrow. And like every entrepreneur has a dream, I have a dream for Arrow. And that dream is that we will be in anything and everything that has to do with electronics within the next 5 years. But one of the best ways to really share those thoughts with you is to go back in a little history and show you how the reinvention has taken place up till now. So in the 30s, radios came out, and Arrow sold radios. This was a new era of communication. It was a new era of product design. There were people that had never heard anything before that came out when you plugged something into the wall. And that's what we did. And Radio Row, as it was called, was on Cortlandt Street, which was the site of the old World Trade Centers. And that's right where we were. And in many ways, this was the China of the 30s. This was the biggest and fastest growing innovation that was happening in the country. And it was actually the birthplace of electronics distribution. And there's a picture. We were actually there in the 30s. But radio was life-changing. It was a great time for companies like RCA, General Electric, Philco, and they were launching miraculous products at the time. But it really unleashed decades of pent-up creativity, whether it was product design, whether it was size, whether it was exterior looks. These radios went from the living room to the kitchen to the bedroom and then into cars. It really followed the same procedure that TVs and the internet did. And although Arrow didn't design and build these products, we sold them. But we learned which models succeeded and which models failed, and we started to gather a little idea of why. But we weren't the innovators, but we were working right along beside them. And these new ideas that came out, they generated more and more electronic parts. See, the world in the 30s, there weren't disposable items. This was 10 years after the Depression. Everybody repaired things. Nobody threw them away like you throw away a cell phone today. If you bought something, you coveted it because you knew you were so close to the Depression that that device could be gone for you. And the Depression made repair necessary. And so people came to Arrow for parts for their radio. And Arrow started to deliver these parts to people and show them how to fix their radio. So customers started to ask us for opinions and advice, and that's where our launch of Guiding Innovation started. Then came along TV. TV was nothing more than a radio with a picture, as you look at it today. But at the time, and those of you I'm looking around know who you are, you saw TV. This was a time where there was more content and even richer content. But what was the important thing that was going on? People believed what they saw on TV. You believed the news. You had your favorite shows. Your soap operas were the things not to be missed. Kids watched cartoons on the weekend so mom and dad could get a little quiet time. It was clearly starting to change some of American lifestyle. Now, some radio manufacturers couldn't make the conversion to a radio with a picture. So what did they do? They went out of business. Because being an innovator gave you big brand recognition, and people would keep coming to you. And as long as you could stay on the cutting edge of the next release, color TV, you stayed in business. Now, Arrow didn't invent anything here, but we watched and we kept selling radios. And then we kept selling radio parts. And eventually we decided, boy, TVs are out there, let's get more parts. And of course, another exponential leap in complexity came into our business. And that made us even stronger, because now we were working in the world of radio and we were working in the world of TV. But by the 60s, all of this innovation came to be known as electronics. And electronics became a part of our lifestyle. That's how we lived every day. But we started hearing about brands in the 60s that came from Japan or Korea or the famous Made in Hong Kong. And it was a global business because there were now competitors. And they were doing a lot of interesting innovation. But it wasn't just an industry cluster, it was a way of life. Space Command, stereo systems, quadraphonic, more innovation. The dichotomy of things that were being invented started to scale tremendously. At the time, we actually moved off of Cortlandt Street onto Long Island because Cortlandt Street could not handle the inventories necessary for the repair business anymore, plus all of the extra businesses that we were getting into. So we were supplying parts in the full spectrum of these new widgets that were being produced. And again, the number and the complexity of the product that we were selling was immense. Now we had to be an expert in space travel. We had to be an expert in stereo systems, TVs, cars where radio was going in. And these manufacturers were dealing with more and more complexity. Then came the fourth and most massive product innovation ever developed, and it was the computer. Computers made it possible for businesses to start doing mathematical spreadsheets and financial modeling at a rate and pace that would save hours of work done by longhand. Typewriters were totally replaced by word processors in a 2-year period of time. This reinvention sparked an entirely new buyer for electronics. It was no longer the home consumer, it became business. And now that business was involved, electronics were doing something big. But there's something that I really want to point out here that is important. With every new generation that came along, the inventors were young. They weren't old. They didn't have any past preconceptions of how business would work. And so these guys would usher in ideas and didn't care about fair competition. They were in to grab the world. And I have to tell you, I've had the privilege to work with some of the best in my life. Steve Jobs, during this time, was inventing a computer system in his garage. And Bill Gates was in a building that had blown out windows developing software. Because at the time, they were so entrenched in what they were doing, and they had an idea that it was going somewhere, but even the people around them didn't see them coming. So we've witnessed a huge change of electronics about every 2 years. And for those of you that never heard about Moore's Law, this is one you can write down. Moore's Law, Gordon Moore, CEO of Intel, predicted that the number of transistors that could go on a single chip would double every 24 months, which in essence means technology will double every 2 years. And a lot of things die out over time, but this has been true for the last 50 years. And this is going to be true into the future. So as computers became small, the pace of acceleration really went after it. You could be successful for a while. Does anybody remember these two companies? Okay. Age again. So I will tell the story now because most of you don't know. These companies were number one in what they did. They built PCs. They took the big mainframes and they brought them down to something you could work on your desk with. And then Atari, the first games that ever came out. But what happened? They did not keep up with customer demand and change their technology for the future, so they were gone. Each of these companies had about a 2-year run and then several years of losses before they couldn't sustain. And that's because they didn't pay attention to their market. And nobody ever thought that Tandy and Atari would go bankrupt. And of course, this innovation created even more parts, even more complexity for Arrow to think about it. And on this journey, we learned a lot about innovation. We learned how products were put together. We learned how design was done. And we had supported that all along. But the key to our success was to support innovation. And we were fortunate enough to work with some of the best innovators in the world, and by supporting them, we continued to learn. We're also lucky that the things that we do today continue to grow by leaps and bounds. Because when things aren't necessarily going well, every company in the world is redesigning their products, and that's when engineers are the busiest. So if you look at Arrow today, when it comes to electronics, it's really hard to think of anything out there that we don't have our fingers on. It doesn't matter whether it plugs into an outlet, or you have to take a battery and put it in, or has some other energy source. Arrow is working with every manufacturer in the world, helping them innovate their products. And today, the number of parts and complexity has even gone up again. This complexity continues to grow at a 2-year pace. And so we've learned not just about parts, not just about innovation, but now we have to be an expert in supply chain, because parts are going all over the world, and we need to continue to make sure that we stay abreast of our business. Operator error. So at this point, I know it sounds like it, but we really don't know where everything is going. And what we do is we survive and we thrive, and we've had to be committed to constant learning. We've had to keep our eyes open. When we got into the computer business, we really didn't know what we were getting into. And for a time there, we were sort of embarking a little off of our journey and thought we would get into products. And some of the people wanted to scale back. My thought process was, we have been successful in being a partner with innovators, and that's exactly what we need to do in the computer business. We need to partner with IBM. We need to partner with Hewlett-Packard. We need to partner with Sun. And I'll remember the first conversation I had with Lou Gerstner at IBM. And I went up to him and I said, you know, Lou, I think Arrow Electronics can deliver a server in the data center and have it installed 3 weeks faster than IBM can. And he looked at me and he said, are you kidding me? There are servers. We make them, we can deliver them, and we can install them. And I said, yeah, all of that takes about 3 weeks. I can do it in about 3 days. So he was a little bit intrigued. And he said, well, yeah, but how many of them do you think you can install? And I said, well, $2 billion worth. Lou Gerstner gave us the franchise. We proved we could. At the end of the first year, we were on $1 billion run rate. And then, would you know it, Hewlett-Packard and Sun just had to have us as partners. So learning costs nothing, but learning pays big. I really liken our journey to going down the road, and you're in a car and you go to the next town. You know what? You're going to learn something about that town. You're going to take some right turns. You're going to make some mistakes. But in order to learn anything, you've got to be on the road. We really don't know where the next road is going to take us. But we do know that if we're not on the journey of electronics, it won't take us anywhere, except for where Tandy and Atari ended up. And by committing and having the courage to really start to explore different technologies, different places to do business, different partners to do business with, we have been able to work with some of the greatest innovators in the industry. But we haven't learned just about technology and what works and what doesn't. We've had to learn about supply chains and manufacturing. And one of our biggest businesses today is to show manufacturers how to become more efficient and get their cost out of the supply chain so they can use their money to innovate. See, the whole idea is not to spend the same dollar on your partners or your customers. It's to eliminate the expense they have to have in your area so they can continue to develop out into the future. Because everyone knows there aren't enough development dollars in the world. So if we can free that up for innovators, then they become our friends. We become the knowledge partner of how to do that. And eventually, they've just let go and say, give it to Arrow. So by the 90s, we were working in some pretty far away places. We were deeply integrated into the supply chains of some of the biggest and most aggressive companies in the world. And as they moved their manufacturing to different places, we moved with them. We had to figure out how to send parts from New York City to Hong Kong. We had to know how to get to Frankfurt, and then maybe from Frankfurt to Hong Kong. We had to figure out where all of our partners were manufacturing their products and try to get them to a central location so we could disperse them around the world for them. We were drug into this. Nobody says in the 90s, well, you're a North American company, and if you're not ready to go in Asia Pac and in Europe, within the next 10 years, you'll be out of business. So what do? What we always do when we're not sure what to do next, we buy something. So we really spent some time going to Asia, talked to a lot of people. Finally, we got somebody to let us acquire their company. And that entrepreneur stayed with us and taught us the ropes about doing business in China and Taiwan. And at the same time, we launched acquisitions in Europe. And before we knew it, we had entrepreneurs that were helping us figure out how to move parts around. Because those entrepreneurs no longer needed cash. Arrow had the cash. All they had to figure out was how to make the supply chain work better, faster, cheaper, and more efficient. So that's how our global presence. We did 85 acquisitions through the 1990s. And over the last 2 years, we added 20 more. So there is something that when a company grows at this dramatic pace, you have the opportunity to learn some lessons. Some of the lessons are hard fought. They don't all come easy. It was like the collision course with Arrow and I. I've had some major collisions over my years. But there's one thing that I've learned, and that is make everybody feel as though they are a part of everything you're doing. Because when you get that, everybody feels they can contribute. Acquirers, you see, they often act like conquistadors. I can't put it in any other way. They disrespect the natives. They deal harshly with anyone that would dare push back. So at Arrow, we don't go in and say, do it our way, do it this way. We learn. We continue with our ferocious learning concept, and we go in and find out what these companies are all about. And if need be, we support them with specialists where they need the help. But it again is about the dream. And remember, every problem, every business starts with a problem. It doesn't start with a profit. So we really position Arrow to act like a bank. What we do is we go in and work with the management team. We agree on the financial resources. The hardest thing you ever do in your life is do a budget. Because I don't care what your professors tell you, I have never seen one work. You know, guys can say, no, I'm going to do $1 billion next year. They do $500 million because the technology is falling off the end of the earth. Another guy says, I can do $200 million. Next thing, he's doing $1 billion. So they don't work. My philosophy is you have to strategically know where that company is going and guide them toward the strategy. And as long as they execute on the strategy, I don't worry about the rest. Innovation usually comes a year behind what you think. The innovation is there. It's just the consumers aren't ready for it. And there are some of you in this room I know, goes a third, a third, a third. The first third says, gotta have it, iPhone 6. I want that. Did you ever think that it won't sync with your iPad? Don't care. Gotta have it. Then there's the next bunch that says, gee, you know, they get the syncing problem done, get a new cord in, and I can use this with what I have. I'm in. So that's the second third. The last third would never change if you continued to manufacture the old product. But that's how life works. And so we set the targets, and we help the management team. And I believe our success is because we allow the entrepreneurs to run their dream. So I'd like to share with you just really one example of how this manifests itself in Arrow. So Chris Mayo, one of our employees, she wrote what she thought our strategy meant to her. And if you look at it, it says, hi, I'm Chris Mayo. I understand the company's long-term strategic vision, and I live it every day. I'm committed to improving Arrow's image of the business community. I'm finding new ways to share Arrow's vision with the outside world, to open new doors, reach new audiences, build new relationships, and start new conversations. I'm working on the solutions to these challenges each day. I'm Chris Mayo, and I'm 5 years out. Running a company, you can ask for nothing more than the strategy that you have laid out for people to embrace that and then define what that means for their job. And how we treat our people defines whether or not they're willing to go the extra mile and help you connect the strategy to their job. And if you can get that with 17,000 people, you will never lose money one day. So as you can see, we've come a long way. We're not just about parts anymore. We're also about logistics services. We started out with parts. We started out on Cortlandt Street. But by helping innovators, sticking with that formula, continuing to remove complex problems that affected our customers, we've been able to rise above the parts. And we've stuck with this formula over and over and over. But this sort of reminds me of another lesson that I had to learn. If you really want to accomplish great things, what you need is a problem, but not enough money to do it. And ours is a company that grew despite never having quite enough money. I used to go into the conference rooms at hotels, and at the end of a meeting, I would scoop up all the pads and all the pencils and all the Jolly Ranchers and bring them back and hand them out in the office. But I got to tell you, things were so bad for us that we used to send the payroll checks out on Friday. And we used to tell the general managers, in the event of death, you do not hand out those checks before 5 o'clock. Now, why did we do that? Because the banks closed at 4:30, and we knew if we handed the checks out at 5 o'clock, that there would be a good chance we'd have enough money on Monday to pay everybody. And this is how our life was. But if you can truly do things that customers need, you make them complex, and you scale that, you will be successful. When we look into the future, you've heard about the cloud. And what is the cloud? Well, it's cloudy for everybody, including me. But I can tell you this, that what the cloud does is it takes the complexity out of computer systems for the user. So that means all of you that have gone in to buy your Apple, you've heard of the Apple Cloud, I'm sure by now. Oh, just put your pictures up there on the cloud. It's really easy. Couple of clicks, send your pictures up, take your PC. If it gets stolen, don't worry about it. All your stuff is up there on the cloud. Well, that's all fine and dandy. But behind the scenes, where we work, this is a difficult task. And the challenges with building out the cloud are so immense that no one has enough money to do this. So think about it this way. What happens when IBM says, let's build a smarter planet? You guys have all seen this commercial, right? Well, let me tell you what happens when they make a statement like that. So they come to us and they say, Mike, what technology should we use to build this? What and where do we need to put it? And who do we need to put it there with? Forget that. Can you build it for us? So you have to think that this is an area where these three questions are the most important questions to get asked. I'll tell you, if Arrow had enough money to build the cloud, I would consider it. But we don't. That's why you have Google building big data centers all over. By the way, does anybody know who the third biggest developer and builder of computer products is? It's Google. Have you guys ever seen a Google computer? No. But they're in every one of their data centers. Think about a byproduct of a business that needs computing that can actually be the third largest builder of computers in the world just to support what they use internal. So you think the cloud is expensive? Yes. You think somebody can build more computers than Dell or Hewlett-Packard or Sun Micro? Yes. And they don't even sell them in the open market. So this industry is going somewhere big. But I will tell you, in all of the things that we have done great, all of the innovation we have supported, all of the people and the friends I have made, I feel terribly guilty because I have created a problem that goes well beyond anything I had ever imagined. It really came from the observation that all of these systems we've helped build, all of these cell phones, come to a tragic end. And because we're a disposable society, these products have ended up in landfills for the past 30 years. This is called e-waste. And it's also known as ITAD, IT Asset Disposal. Or it's known as EAD, Electronic Asset Disposal. I don't really care what you call it, but remember how I said, find a problem that really exists and scale it, and you will be successful? Arrow Electronics today is the largest recycler of electronic waste in the world. We started this business just 2 years ago. And let me put it in perspective for you. There are 300 million new devices that go into the marketplace every year. We recycle about 1%, and we are the largest in the world. So think about how many years this business could run and how much opportunity there is in a business that is all about recycling and using technology that already exists for people that can use it. But I got to tell you something else. I'm sure that building a business to solve this problem, that really is one I detest, which is one of the reasons that this is what we're doing, that I will create another problem. And the good news about that is I'll be long gone, and all of you DU students will be solving the problem that I caused that probably will be unsolvable. I'd like to show you just a short video about what asset recovery is, e-waste is, and remember, everything you do starts with a problem, not a profit.
In the next 5 years,
The typical human being
Will consume more than 14 handheld devices. 14.
Computers,
Smartphones.
tablets,
Pods.
pads.
You name it.
a new generation every 18 months.
a cycle of constant improvement.
But here's the question.
Where will the old ones go?
Will the parts that are still useful be saved? Or will they be buried in landfills?
Are you even thinking about this?
Is anyone thinking about this?
If you are,
Then you're thinking 5 years out.
And you're probably working with us.
Arrow Electronics. Are you 5 years out?
So now we've come full circle in the evening. We've come back to guiding innovation forward. So we've seen the ongoing transformation of what's happened into the electronics industry from the early 30s all the way through the computer products era to now where electronics proliferates everything that you deal with in the course of a day. Whether it's automobiles, toasters, microwave, ovens. Before you get out of bed in the morning, you will have touched Arrow Electronics 14 times. By the time you've gone halfway through your day at work, you will have touched this 25 times. And by the end of the day, you will have touched this 50 times. And it brings me back to a reminder of why we really exist. We exist to help our customers and our suppliers. We're in the business of possibility, what could be. But we're also in the business of practicality. Can it work? Can we afford it? We've learned that this is called the innovator's paradox. This is the constant struggle between what's possible and what's practical. But our industry really needs to be able to deal with this. What can technology do for you? How much is it going to cost? Where is that spectrum that says the product will work or will not work? You know, I work in this industry because I'm attracted to innovation. And I'm really attracted to the possibility and the creativity of it all. It's something that I love. It's very fast-paced. It's hard to keep a handle on. But on the other hand, every day I listen to new ideas. And the biggest fear is that we will get snow-jobbed or sold a bill of goods and then be duped by the innovation genie. And that product will go nowhere. So over time, if we only concentrate on possible, we don't ever get any product to market. And if we only concentrate on practical, consumers get bored because it's not interesting enough. So innovation really requires a dealing of both. Now, I know the innovator's paradox is a little bit complex, so I thought maybe there's an easier way I could explain it to you. Sir Edmund Hillary was on the realm of possibility when he decided he wanted to climb Mount Everest. But in order to climb Mount Everest, he needed some practical help. So there was Norgay Tenzing. And Tenzing carried the tents, carried the water, carried all the supplies, and guided Sir Edmund Hillary to the top of Everest. And you know, when they came down at the end of that, it was Sir Edmund that got all the accolades. He had been the first man to get to the top of Everest. Well, it was really Tenzing that was critical to his success. After all, he had guided the guy up. But he took no credit. So in many ways, Arrow Electronics is the Sherpa of the electronics industry. So in order to really thrive and survive, we've had to think about things, and we've had to think about what forward thinkers do. And we've had to do it all around the world. You remember in 1964, that's the first time that I had heard anything about a world market. And if you look at your history lessons, you'll see that there were people then that sort of imagined that there could be a global economy. Well, today it's real. It exists, it's here, and it has been here for several years. Now you say, no, it doesn't exist. That's the Dallas Cowboys, and that's their stadium. Yes, it is. There is not one item that you see electronically on this picture that was made in the U.S. So global competition has become real. It has become fierce. And every day we fight that battle with our competitors. And I have to tell you, because of the way we think, our forward thinkingness, at Arrow Electronics, we fight our competitors on their soil. We don't let them out of China. We haven't let them out of China in 15 years. And why? I will spend whatever it takes to keep Arrow Electronics safe and the leader of innovation. But today, the practical side of this is we have 350 locations all around the world in 53 countries supporting global innovation. Every language. Our business is be global, act local. So I'd like to give you a few examples of something that might have been considered on the realm of possibility for electronics not that long ago. Picture a design engineer today working at home at 2 o'clock in the morning on the World Wide Web with somebody from Asia designing the next widget. Now, we have engineers that are out there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but just the sheer speed of development over the internet today and pulling great minds from all over the world to solve a complex problem is a reality. Or imagine the fact that today we would have to ship parts all over the world and they would cost the same in China as they do in the US, as they do in Europe. Or the practical nature of building warehouses that are so big that you can fulfill an order in 10 minutes or less. Or specialized salespeople. Today, our salespeople are required to be specialized. They need to know about semiconductors. They need to know about passive electronics. They need to know about computer systems hardware. They need to know about software. But you know what? They also need to know about the cloud. But the most important thing they have to know is to be general enough that they can hear, feel, and sense a customer problem. Because if they can't do that, they're no good to us. If you can't sense what your customer has that is giving them fits, you can never be a part of their team. So this idea of find something complex that your customer doesn't want to deal with and get it out of their life opens the door to become a partner forever. And we've really mastered distribution through centralized activities. But this tension between possible and practical is dramatically changing this industry yet one more time. But before I get to that, think of what we've come from in your lifetime. We've gone from pieces to processes. We've gone from text to touch. We've gone from PCs to portables. We've gone from local inventory to global logistics. And it all started here. Together, we've all come from parts. But now, it's all about people. The next wave of innovation, people are going to play an even bigger part than they have in the past. So we're no longer a supplier or a distributor. We're an innovator for innovators. And much of the work that we'll be doing in the future will be to solve even more problems. But finding that this is our problem, and this is also our space, we now have to develop a different kind of person to make this happen. So what kind of person is this? It's a person that has to show the ability to deal between confidence and cynicism. Have to be able to have some optimism, but also a doubt in what they're recommending. They have to be completely trustworthy. I heard at the beginning of the thing we were talking about ethics, trust, and values. No business today can exist without those. Just like quality became the idea that you have to have it to even play the game, today, without those three, you can't even participate. But here is the biggest movement that we have ever seen in this industry. And that is taking something that is physical and now moving it into virtual. Virtual intelligence, virtual games, things that let you escape reality. The cloud, a virtual place to go for all of your information. There's nothing hard about it. That's why they call it a cloud. So the industry is moving into something yet that is even more dramatic. So we have to go back and consider what drives us. How does this change how we manage this tension between possibility and practicality? And the truth is, we don't. It is a timeless equation that will move on for years to come. So how do we guide innovation forward? Through an expanded offering that continues to touch every arrow or every part of electronics. And remember, our dream is to be in anything and everything that has to do with electronics. From the initial concept or design of a product to now where I've taken us into being a high-tech garbage man to clean up the mess along the way. And the circle continues to expand. There really are three parting pieces that I'd like to leave you with that I think it's important for you as students and maybe a refresher for people that are in here running companies. The first thing is sacrifice. Everybody in the business is making huge sacrifices. And where things were with us at their darkest, 2008, we were sitting around in the room as we were watching $4 billion of our sales evaporate in thin air. And we were facing layoffs. I had sat down with my management team, and we were trying to figure out what is it we could do to change things. So we all looked at each other, and I floated the idea of a pay cut. But not just any pay cut. This was an idea that the executives would take the biggest pay cut of all, and then the vice presidents. Now, I typically don't like vice presidents, so anything to reduce their pay is always good for me. But the truth is, the executives would take the biggest piece, the vice presidents would take the next, and then everybody else would take a little more. But the reason for it was not that we were going through bad times. The reason was that we could save 500 jobs collectively as a company if we did this. And so we did it. And I floated the idea at a town hall, and I didn't get any grimacing or grousing. Everybody knew the market was bad, and everybody knew times were tough, but the idea that we could save 500 people, and by the way, not everybody in the room knew if they were one of the 500 or not. So the idea that you could keep everybody there, and when the market turns, we would have 500 people that would aid us, that we wouldn't have to go out and hire and retrain when the market came back. So, you know what? They did it. And from 2008 until last year, our employment levels went from 11,000 people to 17,000 people, and our revenues went from 14 billion to 21 billion over the toughest economic times we have seen in this country since the Great Depression. So that was lesson one. Lesson two is I believe in absolute clarity. I do not believe that somebody is driving to work in the morning, fixing their hair in the mirror, listening to the radio, saying, I'm going to drive to work today and I'm going to be a really bad employee. I just don't believe that happens. But because of that, I've had to ask myself the question of what makes a good employee versus a bad one. And a good person really knows what they're supposed to do. They come in, like Chris Mayo comes in, knows what she has to do, knows how she can move her job forward, knows how she can move the company forward, and then there's another person that doesn't. My firm belief is that that's leadership's responsibility. If that employee doesn't know, at the first sign of them not knowing, leadership has got to step in and help that person along. Now you say, isn't the world about feed your eagles and flush everybody else? No, it's not. Because once they get it, you don't ever have to have that conversation again. And that's the beauty of it. So bad management on the front end will not lead you to anything good. So if you don't hold your leadership accountable to making their people a success in your business, you are wasting a lot of talent, a lot of resources, and a lot of money rehiring for jobs where people aren't successful. And you never ask yourself the question, why couldn't they make it? So I firmly believe that is a leadership issue all the way. And the last one is, you got to walk the talk. You've heard this said 1,000 different ways. But in business today, you need to raise your hand when you can do something. If you can help a customer, if you can solve a complex problem, you better raise your hand. But then you better follow through. If you say you can do something, you better do it. Because the world today has no room for people who can chuck and jive their way through the system. It just doesn't happen. And you have to manage between practicality and possibility always. Not only in your career, but I can tell you even in your personal life. So at the end of the day, I believe Arrow is going to continue to grow long past my tenure. And this last video I hope will work, will maybe show you a summarize of what we've talked about today. So with that, enjoy it.
Electronics, GPS devices, wireless phones, computer processing chips, heat dissipation, retail kiosks, cars, missile defense systems, toasters, irrigation systems, medical resonance imaging devices, toys, jumbo jets, telematics, TVs, stereo music systems, coffee makers, video games, popcorn makers, wind turbines, vacuum cleaners, real-time language translators, smart grids, electric guitars, tablet computers, laptops, pinball machines, sonic memory chips, voice activated pacemaker drones. Life. Are you 5 years out? Arrow Electronics.
So I'd like to close the evening and again thank everybody in here for deciding to spend your time and not run out the door. I hope I've piqued your interest a little bit about what Arrow Electronics is all about. And for the new grads, I hope someday that we can work on something spectacular with you. So thank you very much.
All right, everybody, you can do better than that. Big round of applause for Mike Long.
Thank you.
So, Mike, during your talk, I had the thought of Wayne Gretzky and the famous quote that came when somebody asked him what was his secret to success. He says, "I skate to where the puck is going, and others wait for the puck to come to them." And it's clear that under your leadership, Arrow is skating to where the puck is going, and as importantly, you're taking us with that puck. So let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you very much.
I do have to admit that early in your career, you probably could have changed that quote and said, I drive to where my boss is drinking, and that probably would have been applicable. I'm not sure we'll include that story in our career class, but perhaps. That was terrific. Well, this was a wonderful way to start the Voices of Experience speaker series for this year. I hope you will join us again. In October, we have Stuart Stockdale, President of Global Services for Western Union. We have John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. We have Maxine Clark, the CEO of Build-A-Bear. And working out the calendar right now for Meg Whitman with HP, and also Jim Collins, who is the famous leadership author of Good to Great. Please join us in the lobby for a reception. And one more time, let's thank Mike Long.
Thank you. Thanks.